Vulnerability requires two things. It requires invitation and proximity. Invitation that says, hey, will you join me in this? And proximity that says, and I want to allow myself to be close enough in proximity so that you can actually see where my feet are now. Disclosure says, look at the path I walked. Vulnerability says, look at the place I'm standing. And if we get wild, may I share with you the place I think I want to go? Then we create some magic because now we've invited someone to actually go with us.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing. And I want to wind it back for a second here and build a little commonality here, because this is such a rare treat for me to meet someone, Rocky, that has moved as much as you moved, because I did the same thing. You said 13 times by seventh grade. That was not me. I was 13 times or 17 times in 21 years, but 13 different schools by high school. So that was amazing to finally meet someone that knows what it's like to go to a different place for different reasons, but to go to a different place all the time. So experiences may have been somewhat in a parallel universe. And then I started my coaching business in 2014 as well. So a couple of things there. Man, I'm just loving this story. You mentioned the word disclosure. You said, come back to that if you want to. So I'm curious what you meant by, you just unpack disclosure for us for a little while.
Yeah, so I think oftentimes, especially folks that are good and effective communicators, and those of us that we are, one of our survival mechanisms, and I want to be clear, when I say survival mechanism, I'm not referencing that we're doing anything false, wrong, or fake. We are doing exactly what we know in order to keep ourselves alive, even if it's just emotionally or mentally alive. But I think those of us that tend to utilize our words as a mechanism for survival tend to be really good at disclosure. I am great at getting a set of information, giving that set of information in such a way over and over and over and over and over that when you hear it for the first time, you think, God, that guy just shared his whole life with me. Yet if you had been around yesterday, I said the exact same thing, the exact same way to elicit the same response. Because I found early on in my life, if I could communicate what to you felt like very vulnerable information in a way that for me had lost its element of vulnerability because it was simply information and data, that would build a connection between the two of us where you automatically trusted me because you thought that I was somebody who was willing to go deep. And therefore, I could disclose information in a way that allowed me to be safe because now you felt connected to me, but I had given you nothing. So that if I left or you left, you couldn't hurt me like everyone else. To me, the flip side of that is you get far enough in life and realize you start telling the same story the same way to enough people. You find yourself alone, you find yourself isolated, and you recognize that nobody believes it anymore because you didn't actually allow anyone into your life. You simply invited them to read the sign that described you. And for me, vulnerability began to say, it's not simply the exposure of weakness, but rather my greatest opportunity for growth if I'm actually willing to share with someone where I'm standing today, not just all the places I have stood before. I want to invite you into now. I think vulnerability requires two things. It requires invitation and proximity. Invitation that says, hey, will you join me in this? And proximity that says, and I want to allow myself to be close enough in proximity so that you can actually see where my feet are now. Disclosure says, look at the path I walked. Vulnerability says, look at the place I'm standing. And if we get wild, may I share with you the place I think I want to go? Then we create some magic because now we've invited someone to actually go with us.
Wow. Love it. I love you unpack that. Thank you. There's great depth there. When that self-awareness, you were aware through all these years of being able to disclose what you needed to disclose to survive and or be in that environment and be safe and protect yourself. And then I go back to your story. You mentioned that in the 5-year wedding, that was a transformational time in your life. Is that when you started to unpack and become more vulnerable through the therapy? Is that what got you to the vulnerability place you are now?
Yeah. I mean, 100%. I mean, my wife started going to counseling because there were things in her life that she wanted to unpack that we thought were impacting our marriage. And so I was like, yeah, babe, go. I got you. You go figure it out. And so she had been going a year. And so her counselor was like, hey, bring Rocky with you next time just so we can talk about because I'd be like, hey, I don't know. You get home and you're crying. Like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do with you. What do you need? You want me to
Mhm.
be with you? You want me to be away from you? You want time alone? You want me to leave? You want me to like, and so she was like, hey, bring Rocky with me and we can help unpack like what he can do to support you.
Yeah.
Great. So I get in, she's asked a couple of questions. My wife is talking. She asked me a question. I'm like, yeah, like for me, my dad and my mom. And I was like, hey, she was like, maybe you should come back next week. And I was like, I think you're right. I think there are things I have disclosed to everyone. And for some reason, this time I tried to disclose the same information to you. But because I was sitting with my wife presently, it no longer was a story about history. It was a story about now.
I'm starting to feel
And
something
the
here.
implication
Yeah.
of that,
Okay.
like all of a sudden was like, wait a second, now that you know and you are aware, ignorance is no longer your friend. Because now, if you have awareness and you ignore it, it's not ignorance. It's a conscious decision that you don't want to face what's in front of you.
Wow.
And so for me, it was like, I gotta unpack this. Like, I gotta get in here. I don't even know. You're right. I felt things. Maybe back up. I felt things.
Yeah. Yeah.
Leave it at that.
Yeah. Well,
And I hadn't felt things in a long time.